We are ready to move on here in the panel, where I'm welcoming Frank Hajdinac, the Vice President of Romanian Energy Center, who will enlighten us what the industry is doing to decarbonize. Frank, the panel is yours.
Thank you, Mihai. Yes, I hope actually that our panel speakers will especially enlighten us with what's happening in the industrial sector. It's the third panel now, after we spoke about buildings and transport. And the industry is of course also one of the heavy producers of CO2 emissions because of its energy consumption. If you look at it, the Fit for 55 program launched by the EU is around the corner. 2030, we have to reduce our emissions by 55%, which is a very challenging target, not only for Romania, but on EU level. If you look at Romania, we're talking about more than 40%. We have to reduce the emissions in comparison to 2005. So there's really a big challenge in front of us. And not to mention that we still have to keep also our industry competitive in order to save the workplaces and also to really develop our country. And that is true not only for Romania, of course, also for the whole of Europe. And it's, I have to say, one of the most ambitious projects which we have seen on EU level so far. And bearing in mind then also the full carbon neutrality by 2050, it is really a big challenge for the whole industry and for the public sector which we have in front of us. And I think actually there is a combined action needed by industry, policy and also financing institutions in order to make this happen, this major change for our industry. If we look at the industry energy consumption in Europe on EU level, we're talking about 25% of the energy consumption. In Romania, we have around about 40% of all emissions being produced by the industry. And main contributor here is the energy sector itself with 50%. Roughly 50%, and then energy-heavy industry, which is around about 40% and 8% agriculture. And at the same point in time, over the last years, the CO2 certificate price rose to 60 euros per ton or US dollars. And what we do see is an upward trend. It's at the moment currently stable. It's a significant increase in comparison to previous years when we had prices around 10, 12, and beforehand even below. And the prices are predicted to rise further next year and 2023, potentially 70, maybe even more. And that is, of course, also one driver to push for the decarbonization of our industry, of our society. And again, as I said also a minute ago, this is also a burden for industry for which we have to cope. I would like to invite the first panel speaker, Mr. Alin Ioannis, the CEO of Rombat, to tell us a little bit what you are doing so far in your industry to increase energy efficiency and what are best practices for your industry, etc., and how do you see the overall development?
Thank you very much. As you said, this is a challenging period for many industries, a challenging period for us. Reducing carbon emission is a business imperative for all the companies. The energy transition, the transition to depolluting technologies to force the industry in the way it operates. In our industry, we see two perspectives. One perspective is coming from the automotive industry with ambitious goals. As you know, the transition to the electrical cars by 2035 is a must. This greatly will change the business concept, supply chain structure, will force all the suppliers to change the business models. our industry, the battery industry, will play a key role within 50-60% contribution to the cost of an electrical car. So the focus on this component will be completely different in the next period of time. On the other side, the energy storage is the other area of focus in the context of switching to green energy sources. This comes with needs for energy storage, for integration of energy storage capabilities by the energy producers. I think each company already has defined its so-called sustainability transition path. The path that will follow in the next period of time, in the next year, with clear actions on the 3 pillars. The 3 pillars are the scope 1. Each company are looking to direct reporting of environmental indicators, clear targets for reducing environmental impact. Scope number 2, here we are talking about emissions associated with energy consumption. At least at our company level, there is a clear plan to switch to green energy in the next years to produce electricity from photovoltaic sources. A project that will carry on gradually over the next 10 years. In the first phase, in 2022, we'll invest in a photovoltaic park with a capacity of 4 megawatts that will provide or will cover around 10% of our energy consumption. In the incoming years, this project will continue. As I mentioned initially, in the next 10 years, we aim to produce the entire energy from green sources. We also look to the production structure of the energy suppliers for our energy suppliers to produce the energy from sources with reduced carbon footprint. Of course, in the current context of the explosion of energy prices, I think is a risky, if not illusory point to talk about and to use such criteria to choose the supplier in this moment. The main focus of us and of other suppliers in this moment is to remain competitive and to identify and supply with the right price. But of course, we are not forgetting about the initial criterion. We are looking to the heating and the cooling system that we are using in order to recover the heat and to reduce the carbon footprint in that way. We target to increase the energy efficiency by 30% in the next 5 years, having investment in technology. But in the same time, we are looking to scope number 3. We believe that this effort coming from our side could be completed by the effort coming from our partners, from our suppliers, by optimizing both the upstream and downstream processes. And from this perspective, I will give you a few examples. For example, the selection of our supplier is very strictly controlled, and we are using certain criteria. And one of the most important criteria are the environment criterion. And further on, we have audits with our suppliers in order to see if they follow their plans in order to reduce the impact of the carbon footprint. The structure of the transport processes is very clear monitored. And we have very clear targets also from this point of view. packaging and the management of the packaging is also one of our focuses. But on top of this, I think is critical to look to the end life of the product and to give the possibility to have a second life for our products. I think is critical for each producer to provide to customers methods for recycling products, and more than that, for producer to giving a new life to their products, a second life that will use the initial resources used for produce the initial product. Our mission has been and remain to maximize the resources used to produce a new item. And for this reason, I think is a successful story the way how we recycle the lead acid batteries. In this moment, 98% of the components of the battery is reintroduced in the production circuit. And for this reason, 50% of the raw materials that we are currently used to produce a new item or new product are used for our recycling process. In the next period of time, a challenging situation will be to use exactly the same successful story for new products. As you know, the lithium-ion batteries, the lithium-ion industry is growing and is growing. And from this perspective, a challenge is to find the same way to recover the battery and to give them a second life. In conclusion, from my side, I think is a combination between the resources that we are using to produce a new item, a new product, combined with a very clear strategy, a very clear path to reduce the carbon footprint in our processes.
Thank you very much. I have to say, a very impressive program you mentioned. Maybe just one question before we later come to some more questions. You mentioned that you are actually verifying your suppliers. Do you see similar tendencies for your customers? Do your customers expect similar programs, and do they verify that your program is fulfilled so that the whole value chain is covered, or how is the tendency here?
Yes, for sure. It's very important, the portfolio of the customers, but the most customers are very focused on this area. Mm-hmm. In the industry that we are acting in, OEM as OEM customers or OEM supplier, our customer have a very clear focus on this area, and we are monitored during the year from this perspective. Is very clear from my side or from our side that to work with key accounts, with key customers, is mandatory to have in place a clear program of reducing the carbon footprint. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that's a very good tendency also, and the only way that this whole exercise we all have to go through will be successful. We have to cover the whole value chain, and if we all work together on the different levers of the value chain, I think it's a good chance for any industry to make here significant progress. Thank you very much. Please stay online because I have several other questions. I hope there will be also further questions coming from our visitors online. And I would like to hand over to our next speaker then, Victor Thorntz, Executive Director of the Industrial Planning Chairman's Office at GFG Alliance. Hello, I hope I pronounce your name correctly.
Yes, Thorntz. The name is Thorntz Victor. Yep, that's
okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present the GFG strategic vision of decarbonizing the steel industry. I'd like to start by just again confirming that I think most people know is that the steel industry is responsible for anything between 7 to 9% of the carbon dioxide that is emitted. So it's a very significant contributor to the overall emissions and therefore the impact on our planet. It is this that actually is driving GFG to take this problem head on. And our chairman has announced the strategic vision of getting all of our facilities to carbon neutral in 2030. Now, I want to make sure that most probably everybody says, but is that at all possible? Because most of the other big steel companies would have the intention to get that by 2050. So we're driving towards that in 2030. Now, I think what our chairman has said before is that we are not making any apologies for being ambitious, because this is how you change the world. If there's a challenge in front of us, let's tackle it. So as we clearly with that target in mind, we've got a serious challenge in front of us, and there's a lot of work that we are doing to understand what is it that we have to do to convert and transition our assets to carbon neutral. You can split the steel industry into two. The integrated steel works, which use iron ore-based facilities, would currently be in the region of 2 tons of carbon dioxide per ton of steel and upwards. And then we've got the electric arc furnaces, which recycle scrap, which would be in that sort of 0.4 to 0.5, 0.6 ton per ton. So the real challenge is to actually start thinking about how we tackle the integrated facilities, and how do we get more of the EAFs and swing this carbon emission intensity. Now, in this investigation and development work that we are doing, there's basically 3 themes that is coming out. And the themes are, firstly is, there will be a transition before the transformed state. So what that means is that, yes, we understand that in the end, to be carbon neutral, there's a certain technology that will be required. And for that, we need significant capital investment and development work. And there's no question about it, we need to focus on that. But I think we also need to understand that there's a significant impact that we can make in the transition stage, and whether that's improvement of efficiencies and stuff like that. I'll come back to that. But so I think what we say is, first theme is there's a transition stage and there's a transformation end game. The second theme that's coming out is that the final solution for carbon neutrality in steel, we believe, is going to be a very sophisticated, multi-dimensional. I think this is important to understand, that if there's a perception, and there's a lot of media hype today about the solution of connecting renewable energy to electrolysis units and convert water to hydrogen, and then pump hydrogen through DRI units, and then you've got green DRI that's feeding arc furnaces. So that's a solution that we obviously also believe in, but we believe that that's too simplistic, and the solution will be a lot more sophisticated. And I'll come back to that again. The third theme that's coming out is that we also strongly believe today that the solution for the industry is not going to be local only. It is going to be global, which means that in some cases, we might find that certain technology is more suited to certain areas in the globe, and other technologies in other areas. And therefore, you need to combine these benefits to really be able to make this very significant transition in the industry. So if I just take a step back and sort of start thinking about the first one, in terms of the transition technology, we believe that transition is moving from BOSs and blast furnaces to more scrap recycling. How can we actually recycle more scrap? Number one. Number two is, how can we actually use natural gas instead of coal? It's already a step in the right direction. What is the efficiency improvements that we can implement on our facilities to make sure that we actually drive the most efficient process with the lowest yield losses? Also, in terms of this technology, like for instance, gray hydrogen is something that we need to think about. And even if it's not gray, it is blue hydrogen. So how do we start incorporating hydrogen into this transition? In terms of the transformed state, so this is all the work that can be done in the transition, and we strongly believe that there's a significant step change that can take place in this transition if we drive this hard. At the same time, we need to develop the transformational technology. We believe that transformational technology sits in replacing blast furnaces with DRPs, then feed it into arc furnaces. So that's the technology that we believe. And the question is, how do we actually fuel the DRP units? Where currently we use for basically coal. We want to change that initially to natural gas and then replace the natural gas to hydrogen. So that's the transformational technology that we are driving towards. If we think about the sophisticated solution in terms of replacing the fuel from fossil to hydrogen, in that we are doing work in terms of converting water to hydrogen through water electrolysis, and we're working on all of the technologies, whether that is the alkaline technology, the PEM technology, or the solid oxide cell technology. Can I just confirm everything's still okay?
I'm sorry? I didn't understand your question.
No, that's fine. So I just had my screen changed, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm still audible. So we are looking at all the potential technologies that exist today in terms of water electrolysis, but we are also doing significant work in terms of, for instance, methane pyrolysis, where we believe that has to be part of the solution, is to convert methane or natural gas into a solid carbon and a hydrogen. So that's also a technology that we believe will be part of the solution. And then we also believe that if we think about blue hydrogen, where you actually do create hydrogen with carbon emissions, but you capture the carbon dioxide and then either sequestrate or use that. So that needs to be also at some point a part of the solution. So in fact, we're looking at blue hydrogen, turquoise hydrogen, and also obviously the ultimate is green hydrogen. All of those technologies we are working and developing on, as we believe that they will all be part of the final solution. In terms of the local versus the global solution, the benefit that the steel industry has is that the complexity when it comes to hydrogen transportation can be solved by the steel industry in a much more simpler way. In that, for instance, if we do have areas where there's very strong, let's say, renewable capability, solar, wind, and we can incorporate solar and wind into the process and therefore produce green hydrogen, we can actually produce a green DRI or HBI, which is a product that can be transported into areas of the globe where those renewable energies are not either available or it's not cost effective. So it makes the transport solution a much more simple one, because it's not that difficult to transport bulk commodities. It's been done today, and it's been done for many, many decades. So what we believe is that you need to identify where do you have, for instance, a lot of natural gas, affordable natural gas available. And in those areas, we believe that something like the turquoise hydrogen, which is the pyrolysis of methane, would be the answer. And it actually gives you the ability to produce either your DRI and then transport that, or it will actually put you in a position where you can actually produce the full chain of steel up to the point where you ship that product to the final customer. There's also things like, for instance, if there's the ability to store carbon dioxide. So again, if you go into the different geographical locations in the world, find that certain areas will be more suitable to store CO2 and others not. So the question is, where do we use the ability or the technology to produce blue hydrogen, capture, store, and where do we use the turquoise hydrogen to produce a carbon black and a hydrogen, and where do we just say that we transport the product? So this is the approach that we have. So we're working on all of these technology. Clearly, there's significant work in front of us. None of these technologies are really they might be proven, not that complicated, but the affordability of this is the challenge that the industry has. So I think my last comment is just what is it that the industry require going forward? We believe that there's strong drive by the industry leaders required to actually change. Second thing is we believe that there's significant acceleration in R&D of all these different technologies will be required, and the industry needs to support that. Can't leave this just to the research institutions. This is stuff that needs to be done in collaboration with the industry, and the industry needs to take a significant part of that. We also believe that this transition is going to obviously be very capital intensive, and there's for financial support from the financial institutions, the banks, the governments, whatever, that is stuff that we will need to discuss and get support and understanding to make this big shift. And then lastly, there's also obviously policy. Policy needs to drive this. Policy needs to make sure that we've got a fair playing field. Steel is stuff that is moved across the world in different areas, and it's impossible to achieve this transition if there is not a fair playing field for all the players. So that's just my initial comments.
Great, thank you very much. Very impressive also to see our global player is trying to react and to address this topic. If you make a comparison, or let's say an outlook, what would you see for your Romanian business as first steps, also in comparison maybe to other regions of the world, Australia, etc.?
Yeah, so a very good question. So we believe that, for instance, Romania actually, because I think first step is that our integrated steelworks in Romania is obviously a jewel in the crown. And therefore we need to make very sure that we carefully transition that facility so that we maintain the profitability of the facility, but that we also honor the commitment that we've made. Now, Romania, in our mind, actually does lean itself to natural gas. Natural gas is available, so we believe that the natural gas will become one of the stronger technologies that will be driven through that facility. We also believe that blue hydrogen, so carbon capture and sequestration, is something that will be more prominent in Romania. While things like, if you mentioned Australia would be an area where renewable energies, very high capacity utilization on solar facilities, So that means that, and it's an environment where where the carbon intensity of the grid is low because already of significant renewable energies in those systems. And therefore we believe, and prices are lower, which means that the Australian environment really leans a lot more to the hydrogen production through electrolysis. So we've got an integrated steelworks in Australia that we are looking at converting to hydrogen as the end game, and that will be done through electrolysis. Natural gas is not that freely available. While we believe that in Romania, the answer might be a combination. We're not stepping away from electrolysis, but we do believe that natural gas might be the more prominent activity.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, all the other panel speakers could not make it with the combination of private and professional reasons. Do we have any questions online? Okay, good. Then I have a few other questions. So you mentioned the current, Aline, you mentioned the current energy crisis. There are lots of discussions going on, and rightfully so, of course, that vulnerable customers, household customers especially, and IMMs need to be supported. How do you see the support which is needed in this crisis for your business, and do you get enough support from the Romanian government in this case, and maybe also on EU level for your business?
Yes, indeed, is an difficult time from this perspective. We are using the energy in our process, and is one of the most important costs in total equation of the cost. In last period of time, we have been quite struggled to find solutions to remain competitive, having in mind that the price has been increased almost 3 times compared with the beginning of the year. We don't see too many support coming from the authorities, and from this reason is important to look to solutions for the future. Is important because probably some of the competitors coming from other countries have not been experienced the same impact of the energy as we experienced in Romania. And from the competency point of view, there is a problem. We are trying desperately to find solution for the short period of time, but in the same time, as I mentioned in my initial intervention, we are looking to solution for medium and long term. For medium and long term, one of the solution is to be producer of the energy from green sources, from photovoltaic panels. But this will help gradually in next years. Probably around 10% of our using capacity will be in place next year.
What we can generally see that the different regions of the world are tackling the decarbonization issue with a different pace. And for sure, Europe is one of the EU especially is one of the, let's say, leading pacemakers, not the only ones, but one of the leading pacemakers. What is needed in order to protect the EU industry? And question to both of you. And maybe what does it also mean for your production location policy, if you can say anything on that? Maybe Mr. Victor, you can start on this.
Yes, thank you. There's no doubt that the EU is leading this transition, and as I've said, the challenge would really be to ensure that there's a fair playing field. So it is going to be critical for the industry to ensure that we don't compete with, in some cases, where there is steel made available to customers with significant carbon footprints, and we have to compete against that. There is no question the transition will be expensive, and it will have an impact on the profitability. And therefore, the policy, for instance, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM, that is currently being discussed, is something which we believe is going to be critical. For us, what we believe is that our policy still fits within that, because if we produce, for instance, let's say we transport some of this green DRI, which is produced in another location in the world. If we then we transport that, but when it's produced as green, then it means that we don't have any impact on that, and the global flow of material and the profitability of all of that still works out. So we strongly believe that the CBAM is part of that policy that will be required to ensure that the industry actually drives towards this significant change.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Aline, Mr. Johannes?
Yes, I think the effort that we put in this transition to a green or to a zero emission Europe could be different from an area to other, from a region to other. It's important to have the same measures apply to all the players. What I would like to say is, in the economical environment, it's important to remain competitive, and the competitiveness is directly connected to the effort that a player is doing in order to reach the requirement, compared with how other players or how other effort put other players in order to reach probably a different requirements. For this reason, if we have certain requirements in Europe, we should have support in order to reach the target, in condition which other players from other regions have a different requirement.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel enough support coming here from the EU so far? Or is there lack, or let's say room for improvement, to say it positively?
Probably the change is too fast, or the events from the last period of time are running too fast, and probably some of the political factors lose the connection with these changes, because we see also on the Romanian market the fact that the political factor reacted quite late, and the actions are still not in place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that a phenomena which you can see also in other parts of the world, Mr. Victor, or is that very specific to Romania?
No, I think it's across the world we see the same, and I agree. What we are seeing is that initially the government's policy was basically forcing the industry to start thinking about this. Mm-hmm. I think what happened now is that the industry has taken ownership of this and are significantly driving towards the transition. And it's important now to ensure that the policy and the support keeps track of the transition. And the one thing that we are also obviously seeing is that there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of policy, but we really need to see action. Now that's for everybody, all of the stakeholders. It is valid. We need to make sure that we don't just talk about this, but we action it. And if we don't work as a stakeholder group together, that's the commercial side of it, the funding side, the technology, R&D side, the industry side, all of those need to work together. Not talk about it, but action it. That I think that will be, and we are seeing that across the world. We see some areas where the policy is lagging. Talk is there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action. But we are seeing that all of that is shifting, and I believe that at some point, given the significant impact on the planet, I reckon stakeholders will very quickly get aligned and work together. So I'm confident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I think it's a very, very good and very valid point that the industry is taking over the leadership. And I think also, if I may add here, that also the clients will drive that development, being then business clients or let's say household clients, B2C clients in the future. I think they will be also drivers because they will request it from their suppliers. And therefore, I think it's really great that we have here two companies which are really setting the path also and have very promising and challenging programs established for themselves, which is really great. And congratulations to both of you for that. Where do you see the main barrier right now? Is it politics? Is it technology? Is it financing? The combination of the three of them? What makes it so, let's say, hard to go forward? Maybe if you want to start again, Mr. Victor.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's all the above. I think we shouldn't underestimate the technology challenges that sits in front of us. And for that, a lot of the technology that we are talking about is still in the development phase. And in some cases, when we get really excited about technology, it's technology that has got some sort of a pilot plant running somewhere and maybe starting to shift into a demonstration facility and a commercialization of that technology. But some of it is not even there yet. So there are definitely technology barriers that we still need to overcome. And therefore, I think that challenge and that barrier can only be tackled if the industry, together with the research and development institutions, are working hand in glove, solving these problems and removing this barrier. But there's also clearly the policy changes in terms of making sure that we've got a fair playing field and that we don't get movements of material into geographical areas where the competitiveness is lost because some areas are trying to do the right thing and spend a little bit more money to ensure that the carbon footprint is low, and other areas don't do it, and then we get material being shifted. So I think policy is also a barrier, and I think this is the one we discussed. I think the EU is really driving towards that, and that's very positive what we are seeing in terms of how the EU wants to drive this. But there's also no question in my mind that the capital investment required for this transition is a significant barrier. There's no question about it. I mean, it's just the amounts of money that will be required to support this is something that will be a barrier, and we need to work through that. Now, what we say is that any business case for a project, if the business case is strong enough, the financials stack up, then it means that project will be fundable, and the investment institutions will support. So I think there's also just risk, and it's the question is what is the appetite of the institutions to tackle some of these risks. So I think that's a barrier that we also need to overcome.
Thank you. Arlene, what's your view on this? Sorry.
Yes, as Victor mentioned, I also believe that it's a combination between those three factors. First of all, we need, all the companies, all the producing company will need to look to a new technology or to renew the technology in order for remain competitive, in order to reach the environment target. Some of the technology required for this purpose is on the early stage, and the cost associated with that technology is quite high. In the same time, each company is making a risk assessment and would like to mitigate the financial risk and also the investment risk. And everybody would like to have a return of investment shorter as possible from all this investment, but in the same time should validate the technology within the next years, because is important to look also to the curve of decrease in the prices, having in mind the evolution for the next years. But it's becoming important as well to identify the sources to finance the investments. Of course, we have now a possibility to invest through the PNRR, this European fund that will help the company to remain competitive. Is important as well, as Victor mentioned, to move from speak to facts, because we need to know how we can apply in the next period of time within projects on the PNRR. We need to know how we can access grants from PNRR in order to make investments in technology, and in the same time to keep us competitive. I think, as I mentioned, is a combination between investment, between technology, and of course between research and development capabilities that each company has.
Great, thank you very much. Then I might torture you with my last question. As an outlook, or what do you see in order to reach the Fit for 55 and then the the full decarbonization target for 2050? What is missing? What are the big things which you would expect from policymakers, being it local or being it for the EU, to happen right now to really make it happen so that we will be successful by 2030 or 2050, depending on about which target we are talking? If you want to start, and then Aline.
Our industry is into a big transformation. It's a transformation from the current engines to the electrical vehicles. In the same time, we need to make a lot of investment to keep us on trend. And for this reason, we need to look from few perspectives. The investment in technology that are in accordance with the environment requirements, but in the same time, the requirements of the products that we are going to produce that will have very low impact as environment requirement. And from our side, a big challenge is to identify the financing opportunities to develop new facilities, and in the same time to combine the current products and the current life of the products with new technology and new products that will add on top of the current business.
Thank you. Mr. Victor?
Yes, I think similar response in that to be able to meet those goals, I think there's significant investment required. And as a stakeholder group, we need to find ways of finding that investment. So that's going to be one of the big challenges. The second one is the technology. The technology work that is required, the R&D work to develop the technology is significant. And with the problem with development work for commercial companies is that development work tends to be significant investments with high risk, because it could lead to nothing. And therefore, the industries and commercial businesses tend to sort of step away from it. And that's why it normally sits at the research and development and universities. I think this is where there will also be support required. I think one of the things, and if we want to achieve this goal, we really need to be bold, number one, and we need to invest significant in developments and accept that in some cases with development R&D, you don't get the result. Therefore, you have to change the tap. But all of that work will be required. It's urgent that we do it, and we also together and in parallel look at the investment required to transition this. Those two things will go hand in hand and will be seen as critical for this transition.
Great. Thank you very much to both of you. I think, as I can only repeat myself, very impressive what you and your two companies you're representing here are planning for the future. And good luck on your path. And it looks really great, and what you presented to us. And that is really a great approach for the future. And I'm sure that you will take your path. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. And special thanks to the speakers from your panel. We've been hearing today what 4 distinct yet interrelated sectors are doing to decarbonize energy, buildings, transport, and industry. Now we are down to the last panel of the 10th Romanian Energy Day. And we've been hearing what some of the companies operating in the Romanian energy sector are doing to address this transition. But first, we will take a 3 minutes break to prepare the next session. So we are coming back shortly. Thank you.